Well, good evening and welcome to Dome at Home for Thursday, May the 30th, 2024. I'm your host, Scott Young, planetarium astronomer at the Manitoba Museum, and here we are for another, actually the first of several Dome at Home events in a row here. We've got our regular last Thursday of the month show, which is tonight. We'll go through all the what's up in the sky and the different things that are coming up. But there's also a whole bunch of cool space stuff happening in the next few days and coming weeks, and we'll be going live for a bunch of those as well. We'll get to those as we go through the calendar. I see everybody saying hello in the chat. Do say hello, and if you're a new viewer, let us know where you're watching from. I've got a map here in my office with pins from all the different people that are watching from all around the world. Oh, great to see you, Melissa, from the island. Nice. Oh, Scott needs more volume. Let me see what I can do about that. Let me see. Scott needs more volume. There we go. That's maybe a little bit better. Hi, Tracy. Nice to see you as well. Yeah, it's great to be back. We've got a nice full show. Lots of cool stuff. How many of you saw the Northern Lights show last May the 10th? It was stunning. I've got some video of it up on my Scott the Skywatcher Facebook page. I'm still working on putting together. I took something like, I don't know, I think it was 1,800 individual frames that'll get stitched together into video, and I've only got about a third of the way through. So there was the outburst that was around 11:30 at night that I caught, and then it sort of quieted down for a little while, and then it came back, and there was some really faint purple aurora that were going on that I didn't see with my eye, but showed up in the camera. And then there was another burst of activity around 2:30 in the morning. I missed that one, but I left the camera on all night. And there was still aurora happening as the sun was brightening the sky. And it was really weird to see the sun, the sky getting almost full blue with aurora still sort of appearing up against the sky and cutting through that brightness. That was an incredible sight. I've seen a lot of aurora. I've been doing this for a long time, and I think that was probably top 5 for sure in terms of the aurora that I've seen, certainly from anywhere here in Manitoba, or in Winnipeg, pardon me, or in the range. I actually didn't even drive out of the city for that one. It was bright enough that you could just see it from the backyard. I was planning to go out. I got home it was the night of the astronomy club meeting, I believe. I got home and I was thinking, okay, I'll grab my stuff, I'll pack it in the car, and I'll go to a dark site. And I walked from my car to the house, and I could see this really weird red glow in the sky. And I thought, oh, I can't spend the next half an hour in the car. What if it only lasts half an hour and I miss it? So I just set up in the backyard. It was quite the experience. And if you didn't see it, the sunspot that was responsible for causing that particular auroral storm just rotated back onto the side of the sun that's facing towards us. The sun takes about a month or so to go around, and that sunspot was sort of aimed right at us on the 10th. It rotated off out of view, has survived all the way around to the other side, and is now aimed our way again. So hopefully we'll get some northern lights. We'll see some pictures that some people sent in to take a look at that a little bit better. James is saying, yeah, the farthest south that I heard reliably was Georgia. Folks in Georgia saw the aurora on the 10th. I heard maybe even into Texas. Chris, you're down. I don't know if you had clear skies or anything on the 10th. But did you actually see the aurora that far south? Be interested to know if you got a chance to see that. Oh yeah, there was. Craig is pointing out that the highway. I saw some pictures of Highway 59 heading to Birds Hill Park, and yeah, it did look like the city was being evacuated because it was just wall-to-wall cars. Because we knew it was going to happen. There was kind of a good chance because the solar flare happens, a couple of days before the aurora happens. So we've got this bit of a warning. It doesn't always work out, but it looked good. And so everybody went to Birds Hill Park or to people were out in Beaudry Park. There were people, basically any place that you could sort of get a good view. So I hope you got a chance to see that. Oh, sorry, Chris. There will be some aurora you'll be able to see down there coming up, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Oh, Hollis out in Connecticut. Yeah. I had some people here in Manitoba that also went outside and didn't see it, and all I can all I can explain is that there were a couple of gaps where there wasn't much happening, and so it was only really faint stuff, and so you might not have seen that. But then there were times when it was covering the whole sky. Anyway, you can see some video of that up on my Scott the Skywatcher page, and we'll take a look at some viewer submissions of images in just a minute. Um, Actually, why don't we move to some of our viewer images? I got a couple of shots from people just today that was really nice to see. Melissa was out in Paris, and here we have the moon over Paris. I love this. I love this kind of shot because you've got the big, tall, human-made construction there, the Eiffel Tower, and then you've got the tiny little moon in the background. But of course, it's the opposite. The moon is huge, and the Eiffel Tower is tiny. Um, if I recall, the Apollo moon rockets are similar in size to the Eiffel Tower. I think that's right. Maybe now I'm not trusting myself. But certainly it gives a rocket-like appearance. This is a great shot. Thanks a lot, Melissa, for that. I hope you enjoyed Paris. And Ulrika sent us some great aurora shots. Here we've got the Big Dipper right in the middle of the frame there, with some of the green and magenta and red aurora sort of streaking throughout it. That was pretty much straight overhead. So we were looking right up into the auroral curtain on the 10th there. And then we have a couple of other shots here. Here's down near the bottom on the left there. There's Cassiopeia, the W shape with the streaks there, and the really nice pillars. And here you can see there's the moon over here, and it's not washing out the aurora. So it was pretty bright stuff. All right, let me see here. I'm going to try and get that video. It's so large that it's difficult for me to stream it, but I'm going to see if I can stream it a little bit later on. Let's take a look at the thing that is all over the news right now. You may have heard that there will be a parade of planets coming up. And so I made a handy infographic here to describe the parade of planets. This is very similar to the stuff that you see in People magazine and USA Today and all over the place. The idea is that there will be 6 planets plus the moon all in a line in the morning sky on the morning of June the 3rd. I really have no idea where this came from. I mean, it's technically true in that those planets are there in the sky. Most of them will be invisible because they're either too close to the sun or too faint or whatever. I'll show you the real view in a second. But why June 3rd? I mean, it's the same on June 2nd, except the moon's a little bit farther over. It's the same on June 1st. It's the same every day for the next couple of months. Like, I don't even know why June the 3rd was the date that whatever marketing genius it was that came up with this settled on, because it's really a non-event. So here's the actual situation, courtesy of Stellarium. And so you've got some planets here. There's Saturn. That's in the morning sky. We've talked about that before. It's down low, but it's just pretty bright. And then the next one over is Neptune, which of course is invisible without a telescope, but they mostly forget to mention that. Mars is up there, and it's fairly bright. But look how close we are to the horizon here. When things are close to the horizon, they're kind of hard to see. There's the moon, sure, okay. And then over here we've got Uranus, almost right on the ground, and then Mercury and Jupiter. Yes, they're in that line, but they're right next to the sun. You're not going to see them. No one is going to see them. So the view that we're actually going to get is this. So there's Saturn, and there's Mars with the moon kind of next to it. And it'll be sort of a Stellarium doesn't show the moon very well when you zoom out, but it'll be a thin crescent with the left side lit up, the part pointing towards sunset. And then there's a couple of other stars you'll see in the background, and that's it. This is the big event. It drives me nuts that people overhype any event that they find in an almanac. I think literally there are some people that have known for a few years that, space sells. And so, supermoons, hey, let's promote that and we'll get lots of clicks. And then I think there are some folks that just woke up to it because we had those two back-to-back solar eclipses in October and April, and they saw what a feeding frenzy of content consumption there was going on. And they're like, okay, let's make another eclipse. Oh, well, we can't. What else is going on? And I'm sure someone just went through a book, like some kind of handbook that probably says, these planets are within their minimum distance on this particular date, not realizing that they're almost the same for a month on either side of that. Anyway, it is basically all social media hype. Don't bother getting up for it. I mean, it's just before dawn on the 3rd. It's not worth getting up for, personally. I mean, except that the sky is always worth getting up for. So if you're going to do observing anyway, great. But there's a lot of people who don't know anything about astronomy who are going to go outside, get all excited, hope to see those planets all in a line and not see it, and then they'll think, oh, astronomy's dumb. So this is the problem with all of this hype, right? I'm trying to keep my emotions in check, but it really does drive me a little bit nuts when you get this kind of stuff going on, because there's cool stuff happening, but everything doesn't have to be bigger and better than the last thing. And that seems to be what we're facing. So, parade of planets, nothing. Don't worry about it. We will talk about the planets and all the other stuff that's going on. In fact, we'll switch over now to our interactive Stellarium program, and we'll take a look at what is up in the sky. And so the main thing that's up in the sky is the sun, because we're coming up to summer solstice, and that means the sun spends most of its time. The sun spends most of its time in the sky and only a little bit of time below the horizon when it's dark. And if you're farther north, I know some of our friends up in Swan River and stuff like that, I mean, it really doesn't get all that dark for a few weeks on either side of the solstice. Even here in Winnipeg and in southern Canada, it's still just twilight at midnight. It really doesn't get to a full dark kind of situation. But those of you that are farther south, you don't have to worry too much about that. But it's short nights, long days, and so you're really kind of staying up really late to be able to glimpse a few hours of starlight. Megazazzy says, you'd like that on a coffee mug. Huh, okay, I'll see what I can do about that. Okay. So if you're looking off towards the west, you're looking into the twilight sky, the spring constellations, Leo the lion with the sickle head over here and the body, is already starting to set. I think I've mentioned before that spring skies seem like the shortest season, because by the time you start to see Leo, it's getting darker later and later, and so before you know it, he's already setting and disappearing. We can still see some of the winter constellations just after sunset, Gemini over here and Auriga over here, but really, once it actually gets dark, and we'll just add a little hour here. There we go. Once it really gets dark, we're getting into looking at the spring sky. And there we have Leo, over here is Virgo, and in between is the region of sky where the galaxies are. There's a whole cluster of galaxies in here for telescope users. Most of them are pretty hard to see in binoculars because they're quite small and quite faint, but if you've got decent binoculars and dark skies, you should be able to maybe track down a few of them. Way up over top, we've got that Big Dipper, very close to the Z or zenith here, and we've got the ice cream cone of Boötes. We talked about this last month because right next to Boötes is Corona Borealis, this little crown of stars here. And just over off to the side is where a star is going to explode any day now and get super bright. Well, as bright as the stars of the Big Dipper for a night or so and then fade away. We're waiting for that recurrent nova to go off every day that it's clear. Whenever I'm walking, even to the car or whatever, I'll make sure I can get to a spot where I can see that part of the sky just to check on whether it's gone yet or not. Once it does, we will go live as soon as we can if it's clear here, and it'll be kind of cool to see how the predictions play out with that particular star. It's called T Corona Borealis, and you can get more information on that in last month's episode. Over in the southern sky and rising in the east are the summer constellations. The summer triangle is already poking up over the eastern horizon, nice and bright. These three stars, you can see them from Portage in Maine, as long as you can, look around the buildings. Like, they're bright enough that you'll see anywhere. And going right through the middle is the Milky Way here. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today, because this is really a good time to start looking at the Milky Way, and getting to know the different constellations, but also the different little clusters of stars and all the things that are going on in the Milky Way, because it really is a great area, especially, with binoculars or a small telescope. We'll focus in on that in just a moment. And then if we go all the way back around to the north, there's Cassiopeia down near the horizon. You might remember Ulrika's Northern Lights video, or Northern Lights picture. The Northern Lights were basically right down here above the horizon, right through Cassiopeia, and then stretching up from there. This star here, Capella, it's a winter constellation, and it's a winter star, but this star never quite goes below the horizon. So no matter what time of the night, what time of the year it is, it'll always be above the horizon somewhere. And at this time of the year, it just skirts the horizon, the northern horizon, before starting to rise back up. And because it's down so low, there's all the heat waves and the temperature inversions from the ground that we're looking through, and it can really sparkle and pulsate. You get beautiful red and blue and green colors and things like that. And it's often reported as a UFO. We're right in the time when I've started getting my Capella UFO calls that happen every year. And so keep your eye open for that. Not a UFO in this particular case, but it is really beautiful to see those colors, because the star is so bright, and when the atmosphere sort of makes it twinkle and dance around, and it really accents the colors, and you'll see those quite easily. All right, let's just check. Oh, hey, Vivian, nice to see Goldie is doing better. Hopefully feeling a little bit better. Oh, James, you're checking on T. Corbor as well. That is very good. And let's see. Oh, hi, Brian. And Melissa says, how close is Capella to any planet? Well, right now, there's no planets in the direction of Capella, basically. And it's quite far away from the path of the planets. So usually it doesn't get mistaken for a planet. But depending on, it looks kind of like a mini Jupiter. And so when Jupiter is in that part of the sky in the next couple of years or so, there'll be a potential for a little bit of confusion. Sorry, I've got a little bit of sore throat here. All right. Craig asks, have I seen the Las Vegas aliens video? Which one? There's probably a bunch of them. I don't go looking for stuff like that, but if you want to drop me a link, I'll take a look at it, and I can let you know what I think. I still am adamant that we will find other life in our solar system, but it's going to be green slime or algae or something like that. And it's going to be, I think, on the moon Europa, the moon of Jupiter. We're going to do some stuff on that because the Europa Clipper spacecraft is going to be launching in October, and it's basically going to go there and, I think, find some form of life. It's a long trip. It's a big mission. So we'll cover that in detail, but we'll start that towards the end of the summer and get everybody sort of up to speed on what the possibilities are for life elsewhere in our solar system. All right. As far as planets go, as you saw, there are no planets in the evening sky. They are all in the morning sky, very close to the sun. So this is really not a great summer for looking at planets. I mean, Saturn is up if you wait long enough, and towards the end of the summer, it'll be up early enough that you might be able to see it sort of conveniently. And we'll do some telescope nights around then. But other than that, you've got the moon that moves throughout the sky over the course of the month, and then you've got those planets early in the morning. So the perfect time to focus on something other than the solar system, to focus on the rest of, essentially, the rest of the universe. And probably the best way to do that over the course of the summer is to take a look at our Milky Way. This is an enhanced version just to bump up the contrast, because I know it's hard to see through the various streams, but when we're looking towards the south in the summer, we're basically looking towards the center of our Milky Way galaxy. It's a gigantic star cloud that the ancient Greeks thought it looked like milk that was spilt on the sky. Many other cultures have looked at it as a celestial river. The Kung people in the Kalahari Desert in Africa have my favorite analogy. They call it the backbone of night, because it stretches all the way across the sky, as if it's supporting the dome of the sky. And these dark patches, these things back and forth here, actually make it look like there's distinct vertebrae. And if you're out under a dark sky and you see the Milky Way, think of the backbone of night, because it really does fit, I think. If you're observing the sky and you have binoculars, this is a great area to look. Mostly because, since you're looking towards the center of the galaxy, you're looking towards lots of stuff. Lots of stars, lots of star-forming regions or nebulas, lots of star clusters, lots of those dark nebula or the clouds that I mentioned before. If you just take your binoculars and just scan back and forth around the Milky Way, especially towards the south from a dark site, you'll see all sorts of little patches and clusters and beautiful fields of stars. It really is a lovely thing. And you don't even need a chart. There are so many things there that you just sort of scan around and take it all in. You can, of course, use a chart or software or something like that to tell you what is what, but it's in some ways more fun to just discover it yourself, just to look around and see what you find. There are a whole bunch of these objects labeled M for Messier. Charles Messier was a French astronomer back in the 1700s, and he made a list of a whole bunch of objects that were not comets, because he was trying to search for comets, because there was like basically a prize for discovering new comets because they were new, and that was a big thing. And so he was trying to find comets, and he kept finding these other fuzzy things in the sky that weren't comets, and so they didn't make any money for him. And so he kept a list of them so that he could always check, oh, no, I've seen that one before. That's not a comet. I think he discovered a few comets, but I don't remember, to be honest. We just remember him for his list of 110 other things in the sky that were not comets, because those are star clusters and nebula and all sorts of wonderful things that we like to point our telescopes at. So there's a whole bunch of them down in the Milky Way in the southern region. Now, if you travel farther south, or if you're one of our US viewers or any of the folks down in Central America, you have a much better view, because the region of the center of the Milky Way galaxy from Canada is just along the southern horizon. We can't get a good view of it. Down in, Texas, it's way up in the sky. You get a good view. And if you're down in, below the equator in the tropics, it goes right overhead, where you get a much clearer view. So if you want to really check out the Milky Way, you want to head south if you can. Let me see here. Melissa points out the Milky Way is very important in Peruvian culture. That totally makes sense. As I said, down in South America, you would just have the Milky Way is a dominant part of the sky. Like if you grew up in a city, you sort of think, oh yeah, the things that there are in the sky, there's the sun, there's the moon, and then there's a few stars or stuff like that. But if you grew up in a dark location, especially one in the southern hemisphere, you would think there's the sun, there's the moon, and there's the Milky Way, and oh yeah, there's some stars too. But the Milky Way is just so big and bright and beautiful and amazing that it is really a dominant part of the sky. Let's see. So there's the galactic center, right in about there. We can't see it because there's too much stuff between us and it, but that's where there's a giant supermassive black hole. Basically, gravity pulls things in towards the middle, so the middle of the galaxy has more stuff, and more stuff means more mass, and that all sort of swirls around and spirals in and combines, and you wind up with this supermassive black hole, which is pretty much the center of every galaxy that we see. That's just kind of the way galaxies evolve, is that stuff spirals into the middle and is part of the black hole. Now, if you're out in the spiral arms of the galaxy like we are, you don't actually spiral in. You just keep orbiting around it, so you don't have to worry too much about it. If we go just farther up the Milky Way, you can get to the region that's a little bit better visible to us here in Canada. We've got the three bright stars of the Summer Triangle here. And that's what the Summer Triangle is really for. It's a signpost for the Milky Way. The Milky Way runs right through the middle of it, right up along the body of Cygnus the Swan, perpendicular to its wings. And all along there's all these little M something and NGC something something something. NGC is the New General Catalog, so it's not named after a person, just it's a catalog number. And there, here we're looking at NGC 6834. That means that there's at least that many items in the catalog when somebody looked at the entire sky and looked for these things. And most of these show up in small telescopes. Some of them are even visible in binoculars, or certainly if you've got some of the larger binoculars, like the 70 or 80 millimeter ones, from a dark sight, you can see a lot of these things. You can spend many wonderful evenings just casually sweeping along the Milky Way and discovering all sorts of amazing things. Oh, Phil, yeah, we just, unfortunately, you missed the section about the planetary alignment and things like that. Hey, Fallon, how are you? Nice to see you guys. Thanks for joining. The planetary alignment thing is mostly social media hype. You'll see just 2 planets and the moon. The other planets, I mean, they're there, but they won't be visible because they're either right next to the sun or they're really, really faint. So it's one of those events that is basically being manufactured just to sort of get people excited. But it's early morning planets. That's where all the planets are right now. So that's why we don't have any in the evening sky. So yeah. When you get a chance, I did all the details there. You can watch the replay on YouTube, and it'll give you everything you need to know. Let's see here. Yeah, there's our Summer Triangle, and that's really that marker for the Milky Way. Now, the Milky Way, we see this band across the sky, and if you watch the entire sky the entire year, you see that it basically forms a ring around us. So it's not like it's just in random places. There's a pattern to it, and there's a ring, and the reason for that is that we are inside it. And so, I jumped ahead. Some of the things you can see in the Milky Way galaxy. Actually, you know what? We'll do this in a different order. There we go. We'll come back to those. So this is our Milky Way from the top. We live on a tiny little planet around the sun, which is right about there. And here's the center of the galaxy with the black hole in the middle. There's a big, what's called the galactic bar. And it's the core of the galaxy is kind of oval shaped. And then radiating out from that are all these bluish spiral arms with all these red, pink nebula in them. That's where all the new stars are being born. The center area is all old stars. That is definitely the densest part of our galaxy. Now, this is the top view, and so we are surrounded in this view. We're surrounded by the galaxy in all directions. So why does it look like a band? Well, this is the galaxy from the side. It's basically shaped like a pizza. It's big and round, and it's flat. And it's not even deep dish pizza. It's basically thin crust pizza, because the Milky Way is quite narrow for its size. There's the central core. You've got the spiral arms here seen from the edge. They're quite thin, and that's basically what we're seeing when we look at the Milky Way in the sky. We're seeing a spiral arm either in towards the center or out towards the edge of the galaxy. In the other directions, well, there are some stars in those directions because the arms of the Milky Way galaxy have some thickness to them. There's some stars above us in the arm and below us in the arm, but not many. And then beyond that, I mean, here it shows all of these streams and halos and things like that, but that's not stuff that we can see. Basically, once you get beyond the stars of the arms of the galaxy, it's almost empty space. There's a few of these globular star clusters scattered around, and then that's it. So this is our view, or sorry, this is our galaxy, but we can never see this view. We only have inferred it based on measuring where stars are, measuring the distances to stars and how they're moving and things like that. We know a little bit about masses of stars because we know a little bit about the nuclear fusion that's happening inside them and how bright that would make them. And then if you put all that together into supercomputers, you can kind of come up with this model of what the galaxy is like. So not a photo, not something that we have ever seen, but I think it's a pretty reliable model because it's been around for, you know, a good 100 years actually, minus the supercomputer part. But the supercomputers and the additional observations have just refined it rather than sort of overturning it. So we think this is what our galaxy looks like. And again, there's the sun, there's the solar system, not to scale. About 300 billion stars in the galaxy, give or take, and the sun is one of them. And that's it. So the Milky Way really is a great thing to view over the summer particularly, because that's when we're looking in towards the densest part. And so we can see more of the brighter parts of the Milky Way. So definitely try and check that out this summer. I actually think that June and July are probably the best months to see the Milky Way because you'll see it in a dark sky before it starts setting. If you wait too long into the summer, it's already starting to set over into the southwest before you can get dark. And so now's the time to start looking. Oh, hey, Len, nice to see you. Glad you found us again. Very good, very good. Let's see. A couple of questions. Val says, amazing to think of how many galaxies there are in the universe. Yeah, we used to think the galaxy was the universe, you know, all those stars, and beyond it, just nothingness. But then we realized there are other galaxies, and now we know that there are more other galaxies than there are stars in our Milky Way. The numbers just get so big so quickly that your brain just can't comprehend them. Astronomers put names on things like billion and trillion and stuff like that as a way of masking our ignorance, really. I mean, you can't really understand these huge numbers. We just give them names so that we don't have to think about how big they are. And by doing that, you can accomplish a lot. But every once in a while, that veneer slips and you suddenly realize what a billion galaxies means, and your head explodes. And then you just sort of sit there in wonder for 5 minutes. And then you get back to trying to do whatever research you were trying to do. The universe is, you know, a vast place and wonderful. And we can see a lot of it from our backyards, which I think is really cool because, I mean, for me, all of this started with a pair of binoculars, looking out my parents', we had big windows in the living room, so I didn't have to go outside. And even though I had terrible images, I didn't know that at the time, and I was just fascinated. And so observing all of this stuff is really where it came from for me. Some people will come at this from the other side of things, you know, contemplating the big questions and then wanting to see them yourself. There's no real best way to do it necessarily, but it's the kind of hobby that can definitely occupy you all of your time. Oh, hey, Steve, nice to see you. Chris says, on August 11th, I plan to watch Perseus meteor shower. Will the Milky Way still be visible? Yes, it will. It's still visible, and the only thing that starts to disappear is the very southernmost part of it, but not for you because you've got a great view. For us, we have to worry about that. But for you down in Texas, the Milky Way will be on full display for August. We'll be covering the Perseid meteor shower in our end of July show because that's one of the regular meteor showers of the year. And it's the one that doesn't happen in the winter, which makes it much more convenient for us as well. Okay, let's see here. I think it is time for
Cool space stuff!
There is so much cool space stuff going on that we pretty much had to save half the show for it because over the last couple of weeks, all sorts of cool announcements and launch dates and things like that have been set. This is a long-awaited one, the Boeing Starliner spacecraft, much delayed. It's kind of funny with all of the Boeing jokes going around. It was actually the rocket, which isn't made by Boeing, that delayed the last launch. But that since then there were problems with the spacecraft as well, and this is the first human flight aboard this Starliner spacecraft. So obviously you want to be careful, and you don't want to rush things. We've seen what happens when space agencies rush things when they shouldn't, and so while it's frustrating and somewhat humorous, it's nice to know that they're taking every precaution because, you know, it is rocket science. And the Starliner is this new human spacecraft that will eventually take the pilot and co-pilot to the International Space Station and on the first test flight. And assuming that goes well, it will become an operational way to get astronauts to and from the space station. And the first crew to fly it will include Canada's own Josh Kutryk. And so as part of his training, he will be Capcom for this test flight. Capcom is capsule communicator back in the day when spacecraft were like little capsules. That was the person that talks to the astronauts. Only one person in that huge mission control building gets to talk to the astronauts. All the things get relayed through that one person so that the crew isn't being bombarded by a bunch of, you know, bureaucracy and hierarchy and all that kind of stuff. And that the Capcom is always an astronaut because that means that they will, you know, be able to see things from the crew's point of view, I guess, have the same training and so on. So Josh is down in Houston, Texas now, and at Mission Control, we'll be ready to do some of the things there. And as I mentioned, he will be riding the next Starliner up to the International Space Station as part of Expedition 72 and 73. He's going to spend 6 months on the International Space Station. Very, very cool. And this is his first flight as a Canadian astronaut. He only joined the astronaut corps a couple of years ago, I guess, in the most recent class of astronauts. And so, you know, your first mission, spend 6 months in space. That's pretty cool. Back in my day, the astronauts would only go up for a few days. And anyway, it's pretty neat to see one of our own up there. I mean, all the astronauts say, well, once you get up there, country doesn't matter anymore because there's no countries in space. You know, we're not Russian or Canadian or Japanese or American. We're human. And looking back on the Earth, you don't see the borders, you don't see all of that kind of stuff, which is great. But there is still something cool about, you know, hey, you know, our country is competing at the highest level. I guess it's kind of like Olympics, kind of like I don't want to draw too many parallels because they can all be torn apart. Anyway, Josh is going to be going up probably in 2025 or early 2025 or maybe end of 2024. We'll have to see how this test flight goes. We'll be covering that live, and the current date is June the 1st. So unless that has slipped in the last few hours. Yeah, I noticed that too, James. Yeah, his call sign. Let's go back. There's his fighter, and it says Major Bung Kutryk. Bung. That's a weird call sign. I mean, the only thing that I know Bung is like Bung bologna. It's a kind of bologna that we make in. Actually, I think they make it in Winkler. It's really, really good bologna for, you know, if you like bologna. But I guess bologna isn't a great call sign either. Okay, where were we here? Oh yeah, so June the 1st, there's a Dome at Home special event for that. We'll be updating that just after this show, just to make sure that the time hasn't slipped and so on. So that'll be fun to watch. You can join me and watch the event live. This is something that's cool. China has been doing their own thing in space, just doing their own thing. The Chang'e 6 spacecraft, a robot orbiter and lander, is currently in orbit around the moon, and it sounds like they have picked a landing site. The idea was they were going to go there, go in orbit, and then from there decide where they were going to land. But the idea is to land on the far side of the moon and to return samples from the far side of the moon to Earth. Never been done before by anybody. So they've picked this spot, which is down in the sort of the southern polar region of the moon. And on the spacecraft there, this is one of the neat things about watching the Chinese space program. They don't always tell you everything, but they publish these pictures. And so here on this picture, you've got the orbiter down at the bottom here, and you've got the lander up here in the top. And then just on the side here, it just happens to be, oh, look, there's also a moon rover. They didn't tell us. It's just, yeah, we're going to drive around a moon rover, which is kind of cool. So all sorts of stuff. That landing should happen as early as this weekend. And of course, we won't hear about it until it has been successful in the standard method of the Chinese space program. But it'll be really cool to see pictures coming back. And one of the neat things from this particular mission is that it had a ride-along satellite, the IceCube CubeSat from Pakistan. Pakistan's first planetary mission, and this is one of the first images of the moon. And so the Pakistani science community is very excited to have a spacecraft in orbit around the moon, having hitched a ride aboard the Chang'e 6. Speaking of moon rovers, this is the one that we watched a little while ago, a couple months ago, the SLIM rover, or the SLIM lander from Japan, and it has a couple of rovers on it. This picture is of the mothership taken by the rover. And this is the one that sort of came in for a landing and then flipped over onto its nose. So it's kind of upside down. They got it working. The rovers were doing things. It has survived 2 lunar nights. It wasn't supposed to survive any lunar nights because at nighttime it goes down to minus 150 degrees for 2 weeks. And so usually that freezes your batteries, everything just breaks down, and it's really unlikely that your spacecraft revives. Well, it revived once, and then it just revived again. So this little spacecraft, even though it flipped over onto its nose, has been doing all sorts of great science. And it's nice to see, just a space program go beyond what was expected. And here's the shot that they took just a couple of days ago, and they're actually finding some interesting changes from one day or one lunar day to the next in terms of some of the detail imaging. Here's Europa Clipper. Europa is one of the moons of Jupiter. You can see Jupiter in the distance, and Europa Clipper will fly out to the Jupiter system, orbit Europa, and it's going to look for life. Now, underneath the ice, this white stuff is all the ice of Europa, there is a global ocean of liquid water. We've known about this for a couple of decades at least, or at least suspected it. The moons of Jupiter, they're close enough to Jupiter that Jupiter's gravity sort of tugs on them and keeps the middles hot. Normally you wouldn't have, a hot core on a small object like a moon. Usually they cool off, but Jupiter keeps it warm basically. And so that melts the ice from the underside. And so there's this huge ocean with more water in it than all the water on Earth. So, a huge amount of water. And if you look at Earth's oceans, even down at the bottom where the sun isn't able to shine, there's life. Are we going to find life in the oceans of Europa? I think so. And Europa Clipper launches in October. I think it arrives in 2030, which is, I know, a long trip. But when it gets there, it's not going to dig down into the ice or anything like that. It's going to do some imaging. Somebody actually suggested just a couple of years ago that all these brown stains along the cracks of the ice, that could actually be life. That could be, big sheets of algae or some kind of plant or something growing where it's oozed up through cracks in the ice. We might have been looking at life on Europa since the 70s and not recognized it. I don't know if that's true or not. We'll see when we get there, but that would be sobering. If we've been looking at we've been looking for life, and we were looking at it and we just didn't get it for 50 years. It's it's a little humbling. And my favorite spacecraft, Psyche, the one that I got to go down and watch the launch of, is way out there now. It's out beyond the orbit of Mars, on its way out to the asteroid belt, where it's going to encounter the asteroid Psyche, which is basically a world made almost completely of metal, we think. One of the only metal planets or minor planets that we have in our solar system. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what Psyche discovers when it gets there. It actually doesn't get there right away. It looks like it's out at the right distance, but it actually has to come in closer and fly past Mars and get a boost from its gravity and then zoom back out to get to the right spot to meet up with the asteroid and then get into orbit with it. Okay, let me see here. James, thanks. Yeah, so looks like Starliner's launch is still on for June 1st. So let's see, that'll be 11:25 p.m. 11 on the 1st. That's Central Time, and that will be our launch date. So we'll start about an hour before then. So again, we'll update our Facebook events. And if you don't have all these events, you can always visit manitobamuseum.ca, and that will give you the details. You can find us, of course, on Facebook and YouTube, and you can always drop me an email. I'll be happy to fill you in on what's going on. space@manitobamuseum.ca. Okay, we can't not talk about SpaceX's Starship. This is also slated for launch on June the 5th. Now, it has not yet been cleared by the regulatory body after the last the mission, but they seem confident that they're going to be able to launch this thing on its 4th test flight. And as a reminder, this is the spacecraft that Elon Musk is going to take 1 million people to live on Mars with eventually. But before then, he's got to get it working as a lunar lander, because as early as 2027, the Starship is going to be landing humans on the moon, according to the current plan with the Artemis mission. So these test flights are not just of interest to SpaceX fans, but anybody that's interested in space exploration at all. They tend to be pretty spectacular events to watch. Either the rapid unscheduled disassembly of parts, as they jokingly call the explosions that sometimes happen, or whether we had some great footage from test flight number 3. There was these beautiful camera views of the Starship re-entering the atmosphere, and it was out of control, so it wasn't, satisfying the test. But it was a beautiful view because you could see all of the re-entry plasma. It was really, really fantastic to watch. We never got to get images like that from the space shuttle or any other spacecraft usually, because you can't send live images through that plasma unless your CEO also happens to own a fleet of about 15,000 satellites around the Earth that have internet capability. So literally, the Starlink satellites that we see in the sky all the time are the reason we can get those pictures back from the Starship tests. So this is slated to launch on the 5th. It may get delayed, but certainly based on previous tests. And if you really want the details, visit nasaspaceflight.com. That's not a NASA affiliated group, but it's basically a bunch of space watchers that have pretty much formed their own intelligence agency to watch Starship as it's being built and to infer when the launches are going to be and things like that. They've become really, really well-informed space fans, and their broadcasts are definitely the way to learn about all things SpaceX and many other space program stuff as well. So you should check that out. I'm going to go live for this one as well, just because it's always a fun event. They've decided to slim down the program. We're going to launch it, go up, come down. No fancy tests or things like that. The goal is to get both of the spacecraft up through the atmosphere and then back down through the atmosphere without burning up. They're not actually going to land yet. They're going to land the booster out in the ocean. So it'll land as if it was landing, but then it'll just fall into the ocean. And the same with the Starship. They're not planning to recover it. They're just planning to study how it comes through the atmosphere and make sure that the new heat shield system that they've got will actually work. So that'll be exciting to watch. They've been testing the engines over the last little while. The last couple of weeks, they fuel the whole thing up and they fire the engines to make sure that they're working properly. And they've got all sorts of wet and dry dress rehearsals. This was the Starship 3 that was lost on reentry. This live video was just really beautiful to see until the whole thing disintegrated, of course. But really amazing to watch these things. It's like being there live, pretty much. We have almost real-time imagery throughout the entire flight, which is a lot of fun, especially for nerds like me. Now, I hit the credit thing just a little bit earlier. I just wanted to get back here and just see if there were any other questions that we missed here. Let's see, I thought there were some questions. Oh yeah, Phil and Fallon were asking about the planetary alignment. Again, just watch the first part of the show, but yeah, not going to be a big thing. And I thought there was another question that went by. I must have missed it. Okay, excellent. So let's see. We have a couple of live broadcasts coming up. We've got June the 1st for Starliner, June the 5th for Starship, and we will also cover any other, as those launches get bumped or things like that, we'll definitely adjust the times as well. You can always reach us through social media, Manitoba Museum on the YouTube or Facebook. Email is fine as well. My personal page, Scott the Skywatcher, is also available, and sometimes I'll post some of my my things there. The museum, of course, with a museum and a science center and a planetarium and all these other activities, has a pretty strict calendar of events of when things go on the social media page. So if I decide, the night of a clear night that I want to go live, sometimes I can't get to the museum page because it's got other things already set up for it. So often I'll do things like that on my own page. So you can always visit me there. And let's see. It's really good to see you folks. It's really nice to be out doing Dome at Home. I know that there were a couple of clear nights over the last week here in Winnipeg. I hope you get some clear skies yourself and get a chance to get out there in the relatively warm period and observe the Milky Way, see the planets, and we'll be back with the last Thursday of the month in June to look ahead for July and August. Thanks for joining us, folks. Great to see you all, and I hope you have a good evening. Good night, everybody.